Welcome everyone to this episode of Voices for Social Justice. That's voices of innovative and compassionate experts in society that can speak to current issues related to education, healthcare, or our workforce and upward mobility, and how computing education impacts our society. My name is Diaz. I'm the director at the Constellation Center for Equity and Computing at Georgia Tech. Our mission is to democratize computing. That the notion that so many students are still not able to access and by extension succeed in computing education is a social justice issue. Computing skills are an essential skill of the 21st century, and it's not just about jobs in the tech workforce. It's about being able to thrive as a citizen in a technologically advanced society that is only moving faster, and it's not slowing down for anyone, especially our young women of color, and our communities, our low-income communities. But we have an opportunity to raise awareness and to promote a change for computer science education. Every year since 2009, we've celebrated Computer Science Education Week in early December, commemorating the birthday of Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, who was a pioneer in programming, and she developed the COBOL programming language that helped solve tons of problems in the armed forces and is still used today in business. So in preparation for this year's CSEd Week, we've brought in a special guest who is going to provide us with some insights into rethinking STEM and computing education for young women. We are super excited to have Jannie Fernandez with us today. Jannie is the director of the K-12 Alliance at the National Center for Women and IT, and she is also the director of TECHNOLOchicas. This is an initiative to raise awareness among young Latinas and their families about opportunities and careers in technology. I want to give a warm welcome to Jannie. Jannie, thank you for being here tonight with us.
Thank you, Lynn, so much for having me. It's my absolute pleasure to be with you tonight. And I'm excited for the conversation that we'll have ahead.
Yeah, one of the biggest reasons why I really wanted to get together with you is because, I share a passion for the success of young women and young Latinas as well. So, before we get into it, I would like first for you to, as a Latina yourself, tell us what brought you to NCWIT and why you're so passionate about advocating for young women. And of course, for young Latinas.
Oh, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm a Latina. I'm originally from Barranquilla, Colombia. I came to NCWIT in 2015 when the initiative around Latinas in computing was first taking shape. That initiative, as you mentioned, is called TECHNOLOchicas. They were looking for a program manager. So I stepped into NCWIT with this little beautiful baby of a program of what was a media campaign really designed to get into Hispanic households or Spanish-speaking households through a series of public service announcements. And since then, over the last 5 years, TECHNOLOchicas has grown to be a really beautiful, welcoming community of Latinas that are thriving in technology. But most importantly, this family or familia of Latinas in tech is really a source of role models, of inspiration, of information for younger generations of Latinas and Latinos who we hope would be the next creators of tech. Why am I passionate about this? Is because, as you mentioned, computer science is really a tool for upward mobility and economic prosperity in communities. And if I can play any role in bringing those opportunities to Latino communities around the United States, I'm just all in. I'm just really passionate about what I do. I love to uplift the work that my fellow Latinas are doing and highlight provide them a platform that really brings visibility to the amazing work that Latinas are doing in tech. Even though we're vastly underrepresented, still the work and the impact of these women in the tech space is really significant. So I'm just super happy to be able to provide a platform for these women to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I when I first heard about TECHNOLOchicas, I thought this is such an amazing and wonderful idea and program because it brings, greater opportunities to be able to talk to young girls and get them excited about computing and the opportunities that it provides. So, Jai, tell us a little bit more about TECHNOLOchicas. Like, if you're talking to educators now, um, describe like how schools might be able to leverage the resources that
Definitely.
TECHNOLOchicas offers. What would you say, like the very first thing they should do when they obtain those resources, what those are and what they should do?
Certainly. So TECHNOLOchicas, because it started off as a media campaign, we have a set of short documentaries in English and Spanish that feature Latinas in tech thriving in different areas of technology thriving. So if I would say like what's the one thing that you should do as an educator to tap into TECHNOLOchicas as a resource would be go watch the videos, but more importantly, share them with your students because there's nothing more powerful than seeing somebody like you succeeding in a field. So the idea is to have women from all sorts of different cultural backgrounds and different nationalities, Latinas that are thriving in technology, show them really succeeding and putting rockets into space and creating software and programming, different things. So it's really, I would say that that's like the first go-to resource to an educator. And you can build lesson plans around it. You can build or start conversations around it. And not just for the girls, but for the boys too, because they also need to know that, women are thriving in this space and should be pursuing these careers. But secondly, I would say TECHNOLOchicas is a very flexible resource and we adapt to how you want to interact with us. So if you have your classes that are virtual right now, you can reach out to us and request that we have TECHNOLOchicas ambassadors visit. You do virtual visits with your students. When pre-COVID, we did a lot of this outreach in person. And oftentimes, depending on the communities that we would go to, these were the first experiences in computing for a lot of these young girls. So while we can't be next to each other and kind of working through these problems together, the resource, or the ability to be able to reach out to us and say, hey, I would love to have a TECHNOLOchicas speak to my students. It's definitely, I would say, like the secondary or the second most immediate way to interact with us. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I was very fortunate to actually attend a couple of the TECHNOLOchicas events, and it was amazing. All of the young women, the students at the schools out in I believe it was in California one time. It was just super inspiring, and the women that you've been able to recruit and be a part of TECHNOLOchicas are just amazing as well too. And for them to be able to share their stories, I think is an important part of this program.
Oh my God, Lynn, you hit it on the head. When you said the women of the TECHNOLOchicas ambassadors, I immediately got goosebumps because the energy and passion that they bring to these events, whether in person or virtual, is incredible. And one thing that really unifies them is the fact that they want to give back to their community. They wish they had those role models in front of them to help them navigate that journey. So their commitment to uplifting Latino, Hispanic communities is really, really, it's really personal to them. So again, it's super inspiring. The girls get excited. They've seen the videos at home, and then all of a sudden you have a TECHNOLOchica in your school, and it's like they're seeing a rock star. They do really enjoy sharing computing experiences through a similar cultural lens, which is really important, I think, for all Latinos in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to carry this conversation forward just a little bit. We've seen lots of data, and I know we've talked about this a lot as well too, in terms of, how women, especially women of color, Latinas, are still sort of, struggling in this space, particularly to obtain executive level positions. So I believe that we have, made progress with more women entering into the workforce and other disciplines that carry computing knowledge as well too. But in obtaining executive level positions, particularly in companies founded by men, what do you think we, the CSEd community, what do you think we could be doing better to break through those kinds of barriers?
Well, a couple of things. And one of the things that was a little bit kind of eye-opening to me a couple of years ago at our NCWIT summit was when we were kind of updating statistics. The number of leadership roles or Latinas in Fortune 500 board roles went from 1% to 0. And that is really disheartening. That makes me want to work even harder doing what we do through TECHNOLOchicas. The we You mentioned access or barriers to access, and it's very common that Latinas are stretched with other responsibilities outside the house and with other sort of, whether it's caregiving or taking care of an ill parent or just overall economic barriers. I think that creating allies in the tech space, in leadership positions, is extremely important. Providing the type of roadmap or structure for women to be able to succeed and advance in their professions, I think it's something that needs to happen, but it has to be really intentional. It has to be meaningful. It has to matter to those that are in leadership positions to have representation of women of color at the executive level. So allyship at this point, because they're the majority group represented in leadership positions, it's a key component of this.
Yeah, and this is a conversation that I think still needs to continue with, I believe, a tremendous amount of pressure, not in the bad sense, but in the sense of, like collective voices to really get at, what are the obstacles? What can we do better? And, like you said, build stronger allyship, within these companies. Still lots of work to do, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Zero women, Latinas in Fortune 500 boards. So we need to definitely move the needle in that space.
Yeah. Need to continue to persist. So just sort of, shifting the conversation again, Jannie, just a little bit, maybe taking your NCWIT or TECHNOLOchicas hat off for just a few minutes here. Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk a little bit about, recent events with the election. For example, the country has just gone through one of the most, I think, emotional elections yes. I've ever been a part of. And just, seeing the first woman of color elected into the second highest leadership position in America, I believe was really emotional for me. And I just kind of wanted to ask you, what does this mean to you personally? And what do you think could be impacted by having, the first woman elected to the vice president position? What do you think that signifies to you and for CS education?
I cried. I'll be honest. I cried tears of joy. It was such a historical moment. And personally, I think of those little girls that Vice President-elect talks to and actually speaks to. I think of those little girls, knowing that it's possible for them to occupy one of the highest positions in this country. I think it's important to reinforce for younger generations that these gendered roles that have historically been in place are starting to crack, and then there's no such thing as positions for women and positions for men, but rather important roles that everybody should aspire to. So it was magnificent. I think on my Instagram feed, memes and posts, and I just get genuinely happy because to me, it marks the beginning of something um, that's just going to change how we see politics, how we see running companies, how we see women really advancing in leadership roles. And I can't wait for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I ask you because I think I share many of the same feelings and ideals, and I'm very hopeful that, conversations will shift and change mindsets and, systems and structures that will help elevate and promote women at all levels in whatever discipline or, sector of the workforce. Because I think it's time. I think it's about time.
Yeah,
you know, that,
certainly. Well, and imagine, Lynn, there's never been a woman in this position. So imagine the things that could come about from by just having a woman's perspective in such a high and important role, not just for the United States, but really globally. So I just like I said, I cannot wait for the next 4 years.
yeah. Me too. Me too. And I hope that we, together can continue pulling our resources together to support those kinds of efforts.
Definitely.
In every bit of the work that each one of us does. I think that's still important.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about COVID and your thoughts on how that has impacted our country and our communities. We've gone through, gosh, 8 or 9 months now, just ups and downs, with COVID. And there's big news though about vaccines now being available soon to help us sort of tame this pandemic. And I'm hopeful, right, that the distribution of the vaccines will be made available, particularly to the Latino and Black communities who have been hit so hard.
Yes.
How have you coped so far through the pandemic, and what setbacks do you think this has created for women? Like, how can we bounce back from this?
I have absolute faith in the fact that we can bounce back from this. As you mentioned, it's had an even more pronounced adverse effect on women who are taking care of their households. They're working, they're taking care of children. They're stretched even beyond, what they were stretched before. But I do believe that we we've been able to find ways to connect and adapt in ways that we hadn't before. So we're being stretched mentally, physically, emotionally, but at the same time, I think our ways to be inventive or really creative in how we cope with this has in a way grown a little bit. We're being a little creative in how to cope with things and how to balance work and life. We're finding opportunities to do things differently that we didn't before. Of course, not without challenges. Of course, I do know that those who were dealing with issues of access, for example, to connectivity and things like that are being affected even more. But it's made others come step up to the table and provide solutions and help. I think in a way it's also brought communities together to help one another. I know that some of my friends have created pods where they sort of work with each other to be able to support or maintain that balance with work and home life with their children. So it's we can bounce back. I have no doubt. It'll take some time to do it, but we've been able to really see how creative we can get in certain ways. So I have no doubt. I personally think that I I've worked more now than before. I'm, longer hours in front of the computer, not knowing when work stops and when family time starts. It's just a
Yeah.
blur. Um, but I'm embracing it. I'm just like everybody else. I'm kind of like riding this emotional roller coaster and hopeful that, like you mentioned, that a vaccine is available to all of us and that it's actually distributed in an equitable way, that everybody has access to it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's very important, for our community leaders, our state leaders, and our federal government to really take into consideration how hard the Latino community and the Black and African American communities have been impacted far greater
Yes.
than many other communities. And I and I know we've all experienced this in different ways, but that that data doesn't lie, so we need to pay particular attention to that. And I am hopeful, like you are. I am hopeful that they'll really figure that out. Um, I, foresee that we will still continue to be working remotely um, for a little longer.
Certainly.
And wanted to ask you, what advice would you give women, young, young girls, young women, and uh, just women in general? Like, what advice would you give to continue to, manage and cope and handle both business and family successfully? Like, what are some things you've done to be
Well,
able to
so,
do that?
some of the things that I've personally done is to, as always, I think I'm an optimist by nature. So to try to find the silver lining, to try to find the silver lining in things, this is an opportunity for us to innovate, whether it's at home or at work. Like you mentioned, companies are even considering or rethinking about their structures. Like, do we even need to go back into the building and all of us be in an office? Can you continue working from home? So I think that certainly trying to find the silver lining, remaining positive, and relying on those who know and love you to as a source of support. We're all in this COVID world, and I think that there's if there's anything that I've learned is that there's no shame in reaching out and saying, I'm up to here, I'm stressed, I need to vent, I need to relax, I need to, let's go on a socially distant walk together. So I relying on your loved ones and friends as a source of support, or even somebody to just like listen to. I think it's a great way to cope with things. Um, and I would say that also along those like on the line of optimism, just this is I wouldn't call it a new normal. I think this is like the transition into something new, and to look at it as an opportunity to not go back to the way things were, because we know that they clearly were flawed. So just trying to again be creative and see how things can be different. So this I think is not the new normal. We're going to get to a new normal, a much better one. But right now I think we're all trying to make best with what we have.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I also agree that, some things weren't all that great. You know, the way things used to be. Some things worked, but some things weren't all that great.
Yeah.
So I would like to envision some other kind of balance, you know,
Hmm.
where where we move forward in better ways to connect more efficiently, but also more effectively as well, too, while still being able to balance out work and home. And self-care is very
Yes.
important as well, too.
Self, absolutely.
Yeah,
The way I think about it is like status quo was not designed to really benefit everyone in an equitable way. So if you think of this in terms of an opportunity to establish a new normal that's
yeah,
more equitable and fair to women, to underrepresented populations, to historically marginalized people, I think is just like hang on to that, as a source of hope.
yeah, absolutely. And on that note, Jannie, we like to ask all of our guests this one last question.
Hmm.
Since this podcast is called Voices, we wanted to know who has been a voice of inspiration or influence for you. It could be, you know, an author, an educator, a family member, but someone who has, you know, inspired you and why.
This is a question that always kind of makes me choke and like gives me that little like nod in the back of my throat because the voice that inspires me and kind of like whew, it's like that guiding, like that North Star for me is my grandma. She was resilient. She did so much with very little. She instilled in us great pride of our culture, of embracing our womanness, on not taking no for an answer, of being assertive and being confident in our abilities. And of course, that was instilled not just in me, but my moms and my aunts. Like I grew up in a matriarchy. Like, it was all women around me all the time. So it's no wonder that I'm passionate about this work that involves promoting and elevating and advancing women in general. So she was my first best friend, and her voice is I hear it all the time in all the things that I do and all the decisions that I have to make. So, and I'm sorry I get a little choked up about it, but she was truly a remarkable woman, that did a lot with very little. So definitely my grandma, my abue.
Yes, you're always.
Yes.
Well, you most definitely exude a lot of positive and great values, you know, from your upbringing and ancestry, and we have benefited from it. So thank you so much.
I
Thanks for
appreciate that.
thanks for being here and all the work that you do with TECHNOLOchicas, with you know, NCWIT, and just being you, and for sharing your voice on the show. I've known Jannie for quite a few years and have been so super inspired by your work, Jannie. You are absolutely a positive role model for me and many, many young women. I just want our listeners to know you can find more information about Jannie's work at NCWIT, and also about TECHNOLOchicas at technolochicas.org. Um, we encourage you to use those resources during CSEd week and beyond, to inspire more young girls to get into and stay in computing and tech, and, you know, press through those barriers to reach, you know, those executive level positions as well. We can't stop, you know, uh, working towards that. Jannie, again, super grateful for your time on this show. Um, Thanks for our listeners. Thanks to them for watching and listening. Our podcast is on YouTube. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a few other favorite podcast platforms. You can reach out to us at constellations.gatech.edu, or you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GT_CCEC. Thanks again, Jannie, for being here with us. Everyone, be safe and remember to take care of each other, and have a great CSEd week. this year.
Thank you, Lynn, for having me. It was an absolute pleasure to be here with you today.